Good evening to everyone, and good morning and good afternoon from wherever you are. We are 1 minute past 3:30, and we are just waiting for a few more attendees to log in. Give us a few minutes, and we'll start off shortly. Okay, thank you. While waiting, just some housekeeping rules. If you have any questions from the floor, feel free to type it into the questions area. I will be looking at the questions and I'll raise those questions that you have to Mr. Niall whenever it is available, right? And there is also a handout that you can download. If you want to download the handouts, is regarding the publishing process of the books in Emerald. So you can just download it and keep it copy for yourself later. All right. Okay, so we are about 2 minutes already past 3:30. Shall we start now?
Yeah, absolutely. That's great.
Okay. All right. Good afternoon again to everyone. Welcome to today's session on publishing your books with Emerald Publishing through Emerald. And today we are very happy and glad to have Mr. Niall Kennedy, our books publishing editor from Emerald Publishing, based in the UK office, to be with us today and share the session with the audiences organized by UCSI University as well from the Postgrad Studies School. So without further delay, I shall be passing the floor to Niall. All right, Niall, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Elvin, and thank you to everyone for coming on to the call today to hear a bit about publishing research books through Emerald. As Elvin says, I'm the books commissioning lead for business management and economics titles at Emerald. So that means that I have strategic oversight of the business management and economics area of books that we publish in the company. And I also, commission books myself as well. I have particular areas of expertise and focus that I commission in. So those primarily are HR, organizational behavior, marketing, tourism studies, sport business management, international business. But we cover really a whole range of business management and economics areas. So I have my colleague Fiona Allison, who's another one of our commissioning editors, publishes in areas like supply chain management and management science. So I'm going to talk today. The session of slides that I have is probably around about an hour. I'll take a break halfway through just to check on questions that are coming in. And
okay. Now, sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
I think you need to put on full screen your slides.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
On the notes.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, let's see if I can.
It's okay. Yeah.
Is that better?
Yes. Yeah.
Great.
All right.
Okay, that's fine. Apologies. Great. So that's how I'm gonna go through today. So I'll just flip over to the next slide, which details what we're going to be looking at in the session. So I'll give an overview of book publishing. It's not specific just to Emerald. I'll talk about book publishing in academic publishing generally, and talk about some of the reasons why you might be interested to publish a book, the issues around converting a PhD thesis into a book project, an overview of the life cycle of a book project from the very beginning to it coming out as a publication, some sense of the different publishers that are out there, of which Emerald is only one. And then I'll talk in a bit more depth about the area that kind of I'm most engaged with, which is commissioning new book projects. So the areas around, seeking proposals and how to best produce those proposals, present them to a publisher to, have a successful book project commissioned. And then I'll talk a little bit as well about the process after peer review has happened, and what goes on from there. And we'll finish off with some references, which I think Elvin will be able to share. So I just wanted to say before we move on, thank you very much to UCSI University for putting on this event, and I'm delighted to be taking part in it. And hello to everyone. It's early morning here in where I am in West Yorkshire, which is in the north of England in the UK. And I know we've got a number of people on from Kuala Lumpur, but I'd imagine there'll be other people calling in from other parts of Malaysia and possibly from elsewhere. So hello to you all. So I'll get straight into it then. I wanted to start by just giving a bit of a brief introduction to Emerald as a publisher. So Emerald are just over 50 years old. We were founded in 1967 in Bradford, just down the road from where I am, in West Yorkshire. We're a bit different, I suppose, from other academic publishers in the UK because we're based in the north of England, whereas most are based in the southern part of the country near London and Oxford and Cambridge. The publisher grew out of the management school at Bradford University. They were founded by a group of academics, but for the last 30 or 40 years, the business has been owned by the Howard family, and actually the owner of the business, Keith Howard, who has been leading the business for decades and has done a great amount of kind of charitable work in the local community. Sadly just died last week, so we were very sad to hear of his passing, and that marks a new chapter now for the business, so I just wanted to acknowledge that. Emerald has grown from a publisher that started by having one journal which they bought for £1 to now being a publisher that publishes over 300 journals. It has a booklet, an annual book list of 350 books. It also has teaching cases portfolio, and we now have our own open research publishing platform as well. I'm obviously going to talk about books today, but there are numerous other forms of research output that Emerald can cater to, and I'm sure Elvin will and his colleagues will be happy to talk to you about if you want more information about publishing in those other formats. We have offices globally, not just here in the UK. We have an office in Boston in the US, and obviously over in Asia, Malaysia, and in Australia as well, and representation in Africa, other parts of Europe. We have an international sales and marketing reach. We sell all of our products globally to a whole range of different academic and professional markets. And our key kind of aim is to focus on trying to publish interdisciplinary research, which we want to see and try and have an impact beyond just speaking to other academics with the research, so actually making an impact in the real world, so to speak, in businesses, in professional settings. And as the slide says, we've over 500,000 researchers writing for us in over 130 countries, so we've got really broad spread of the material that we published. And there are some stats as well about visitors to our Insight platform, and also some detail there about the engagement that we're getting for usage, which is great to see. So this slide's very kindly put together for me by Elvin, which shows zeroes in on the Malaysian context. You can see that looking at the screen on the left-hand side, you can see the number of authors, the breakdown of authors, editorial board members, and editors that we have from Malaysia. I'd say that the number of editors is growing. It's still quite small, but we are commissioning more book projects where we have Malaysian editorship or a Malaysian authorship. And on the right-hand side, you can see the engagement that we get for online for our products to be downloaded in the region. And you can see, there is a real range. There are obviously some universities that are using our content a lot, but it's by no means just limited to one or two institutions. We've got good engagement from a number of institutions all around Malaysia, which is fantastic to see. And I also just at the top wanted to highlight some of our engagement with Malaysian authors. So this is titled Chapters for Malaysian Authors, but actually some of the books that are highlighted on this slide have either kind of co-editorship or co-authorship. So 3 of them, Modeling Economic Growth in Contemporary Malaysia, Design with Noor, and Water Management and Sustainability in Asia. They have the Water Management Sustainability book is an entirely Malaysian-based editing team, and then we have co-editors who are based at Malaysian institutions who have led on the other 2 projects. I also pulled out this title on recent developments in Asian economics, which is in a series that we have on International Symposia on Economic Theory and Econometrics, which is quite a well-respected publication, and that has chapters in it by a number of Malaysian contributors, which again is great to see the engagement that we're getting on recent titles from Malaysian authors. And again, you can see on this slide specific chapters that are being authored by authors who are based at Malaysian institutions. These are some from last year, and this also gives you a bit of a flavour of some of the areas in which we're publishing. So, issues like entrepreneurship, retail, marketing, sustainable development in higher education, and also journalism. So while I'm obviously talking to you from my area of specialism, which is business and management, we do publish it in other areas of social science, so media studies, education, sociology as well. And we have, again, chapters in these titles. I won't go into all of them, but it gives you a slight sense of the engagement that we're getting from countries in the region, which is great to see. So leading off then, why publish a book? Obviously, I know in the area in which I'm working that a lot of academics are being, encouraged and pointed towards publishing in journals, and I'm certainly not here today to say that people shouldn't do that. It's an important method of output for research, but it may be that the research that you're engaged with may have a sort of bigger research story to tell, and that could lend itself well to publishing a longer format publication, such as a book. And as a publisher, we offer numerous different potential book outputs with a range of flexible timeframes. So I'll talk a bit more about that. The core of what we do are publishing scholarly monographs and edited collections. We also have a short form format called Emerald Points. And we publish professional books, which are aimed more at a business audience or business readership. Primarily, we're publishing for scholarly markets, but we do, on certain titles, aim them more towards a professional market, aim them more towards a general readership. And all of the books that we publish are published both in print and electronically, and there's the option to publish a book open access if there's a funders requirement to do that, or if it's just something that you would like to see the research be published in. So I'm just outlining here some advantages of book publishing. So I've mentioned that you may be working on a project that has a sort of bigger research story to tell than can be collated into, say, a 5,000 or 6,000 word journal article, and you might want to, you know, expand on an argument or have a narrative through line to your argument. So a monograph generally is around 80,000 words. So it does give you that you know, length to be able to talk about your subject from numerous different angles and in numerous different ways across the span of a book. As I say, we publish different formats, and there's flexibility around that. So one of the benefits of the short form monograph publications that I mentioned is they can be produced quite quickly. So because they're short form works, whereas a regular monograph, the production process is around about 6 months. For a short form work, it's actually 3 months, so 12 weeks, so it can come out very, very quickly. The interdisciplinarity of your research can make it a good home for a book. Sometimes we find if people are working on a subject which is, you know, results in interdisciplinary collaboration with other areas, they may get to the end of a project and then find that they need to, where are we going to publish this? Well, I want to put this in a business journal. And then if you collaborated with like a computer scientist, for example, they want it to go in a different journal in a different field. Whereas a book will mean that, you know, everyone, it kind of doesn't get into those issues. And so it can contain all of that interdisciplinary or pan-disciplinary research. And I think also books still hold a certain cachet and can be a profile raiser for academics who are publishing them. They are able to, you know, say to the wider research community that this academic is an authority on this particular issue, and this is their view, or we've brought together a group to actually make a statement about this particular issue. And, you know, a book can then be exhibited globally at conferences. Obviously, we're not traveling very much at the moment with the COVID-19 crisis, but it's when, you know, things come back, we hopefully will be at in-person conferences and we'll display books at those, and it's promoted through a wider marketing strategy as well. Oh, okay, just skipped a slide, but we'll just go back one, excuse me. So I mentioned about publishing a PhD thesis as a book. What I wanted to say at this point is obviously when people are considering doing this, they've obviously worked on a PhD thesis for some time, and they might think at the end of it, yeah, you know, this has been a lot of work, and I'd like to, you know, have a book come out of this for posterity. As the slide says, very few book publishers will just take a thesis, wrap a cover around it, and start selling it. It's quite an undertaking, really, to convert a PhD thesis into a book, because it's obviously been written with a particular approach in mind, which is to present that thesis and, you know, defend it in a viva. So when considering changing your research in a PhD thesis into a book, you need to think about issues like time, the stage you're at in your career. You know, are you going to have the time? Is your institution encouraging of you having the time to develop that thesis into a book publication? Is the topic very niche? Will that have the necessary reach for a book publication? Because certainly for us, we're a commercial publisher, so we need to think about the market, as it says on the slide. Are there other publications out there in this area? Is there a big enough audience for this subject? So those are all things that should be considered. So I'll just quickly cover this slide, and then I'll see if there are any questions. In terms of the different types of publisher, Emerald are a smaller independent academic commercial publisher. So we are publishing books. We're not affiliated and journals, but we're not affiliated to a specific university. There obviously are well-known and well-established university presses. And examples that most people would know from the UK would be Oxford University Press, Cambridge University Press. There are other smaller university presses like Liverpool, who are more recently established, or there are numerous American ones. A lot of the large Ivy League universities have their own university press. There are larger commercial academic publishers, so Taylor and Francis would be an example. Wiley would be another example. There are some that specialize more in textbooks, so Cengage, Pearson would be examples as well. And then there are independent scholarly houses like ourselves, like Sage, for example. And then there are trade publishers. So in the business area, that might be a publisher like Kogan Page, who aim their work squarely at a professional business audience, or a house like Penguin, who obviously have like a business arm to their publishing. Most academic publishers, or pretty much all academic publishers, will have a peer review policy. They'll have a usually global sales and distribution operation, or they might partner with another partner to distribute their works around the globe. When you're considering approaching a publisher, it's definitely worth looking at that publisher's list. It will all be freely available to assess on the university's website. I think that it's definitely a good idea to take a look at what each publisher is publishing before you look to submit a proposal, to see how what you're considering publishing might fit in with that particular university press. And it's worth considering as well issues around the speed to come to a decision. Obviously, some of the bigger houses are getting many proposals submitted to them, so that is obviously going to take longer for them to work through and for you to get a positive or a negative decision on publishing with them. And some houses, this is particularly true of university presses, it can have quite elongated review and sign-off processes. They might have an internal editorial board drawn from across an institution that only meets every so often, so it can take longer to get sign-off on a project. So these are definitely things to bear in mind. Elvin, I just wanted to ask at this point, before I go into the books publishing process, if there are any questions that come up so far.
Okay, there's one question. Just hold on now. Let me pop it up.
No problem.
One question is on the cost, which I think you will cover later, but I'll still ask the questions first. There's a question from one of the attendees asking, could you please elaborate the cost involved in this publication of books?
Sure. Yeah, thanks very much for the question. So certainly at Emerald, there isn't any cost to the author or editor for publishing a book with us. And that would be the case with most reputable academic publishers, in my view. Where there can be a cost, and again, this is the case for most academic publishers, is when you are looking for your book to be published open access. So I won't go into open access publishing in loads of depth in this presentation, but we do publish open access books as part of the process of making a book open access, so freely available to view by anyone online, and we will also produce a small number of copies for sale at a lower price point. If you wanted your work to be published in that way, we have a books processing charge, BPC. It varies depending on the length and type of publication. So I think for a short form work, it's about £6,000. For a longer form work, it's 9,000. But that is only if you, and usually we would expect that to be covered by the funding for a project that's come from a funder. So we're not expecting for any charge, but for anyone who wants to publish, in a non-open access way, in the kind of traditional way, we would, instead there wouldn't be any charge to the author or the editor for publishing a book with us. I hope that answers the question. Great.
Yeah, I have one more question that just popped
Sure.
in.
Yeah.
So, okay, this person has two questions. So the
Yep.
first one, are we allowed to use the published academic paper, compile them, reword, and then publish as book in Emerald?
Yeah, so that's something that we tend not to do. There are some publishers that do that. There can be permissions issues around that. So it can be quite costly to produce book projects that are a collation of previously published papers, and also something that we try to do with our books program, and other academic publishers will do it as well, is they want their books program to be original research, to be making an original argument. Obviously, it can draw on past research that someone has done, and we would expect an author who has an established publishing background to be drawing on some of their previous research. But what we wouldn't do is publish a work that is, as I say, sort of a compendium of all the papers that somebody has previously published.
Okay, all right. So I hope that answers the question. The second one
Great.
that comes from the same person is, do authors need to do market survey to market the book?
Yeah, I wouldn't say a market survey. What we would encourage authors to do, and this is part of our book proposal, is to look at the other book publications that have come out that are in the same area. So if you were looking to write a book that is engaged with issues in marketing in the Southeast Asian context, for example, it would be a good idea to take a look at what other titles have already been published by other publishers in that same field, and find out if there are where the book that you're planning to write might differ from those ones, and articulate what those differences would be and what the benefit would be from the angle that you're taking.
Okay, all right.
Great.
So
Thanks very much, Elvin, and thanks very much for the questions. That's great. I'll push on.
Yep.
So this is a flow chart. Please ignore the arrows; they don't quite run in the right order. But it shows an overview of the book publishing process. One thing I always like to highlight on this diagram is that there's for me, there's a key part missing in the publishing process that I'm involved in, which actually takes place before number one on this chart. So it talks about, from the author's perspective, this is usually where the process would start, and that you would submit a proposal to a publisher. But my work as a commissioning editor, and a lot of what I do is actually doing research into the research that's being published in areas that match up with my areas of interest, and actively reaching out to people to say, I see that you have published a book on this issue. Would you be interested in writing a related book for Emerald? Or I see that you've published a range of interesting journal articles on this particular subject. Would you be interested in working on the book? So it may be that someone comes to us with a project and says, I would like to publish a book on this particular subject, but equally, commissioning editors have as part of their role to actively go out and search for academics who are at the top of the field working in an area, and invite them to submit a proposal, and work with them on developing that proposal. But whether or not the project comes into us unsolicited, or it's something that we have tried to get to come in, someone will write a book proposal, send it in, we'll assess it in-house. If we think it looks okay, we will send it out for external peer review to other specialists in that subject area, usually 2 or 3. We'll then get that feedback, share it with the author, assess it ourselves, and then we'll ask the author to respond to the peer review feedback. Now, it may be that the peer review feedback is all positive, and that's fine. We'll be in a position then to just take it forward. But it may be that the peer review raises a number of issues or concerns, and they may be so strong that we decide that it's not a project we can proceed with. But if we still feel that there is merit in the project, then we would ask the author to address that feedback. We would ask the author to revise the proposal on the basis of that feedback. They don't need to agree with all the feedback, and they can certainly put their case for not making some of the changes that might be suggested. But we would expect that to be engaged with, and we'd expect to see strong arguments for why they don't wish to take that particular feedback on board. Once we have all that feedback in, and we are comfortable and happy, we would take the project forward to our editorial board for sign-off. Once it gets signed off from the editorial board, we would then get back in touch with the author editor and discuss terms for a contract. So we would discuss issues like what the word count for a manuscript will be, the delivery schedule, which generally would be around 12 to 18 months. We would discuss a royalty rate, and we tend to pay a single percentage royalty rate on net receipts of sales of the physical hardback or paperback copy of a book and the electronic version. And then once that is done, we would contract the work, and we would let the author go away and write the book. We don't disappear, though. We're always there on hand to give advice on format and layout and issues around permissions, issues around featuring images in the book. So, those are all, things that authors might have queries about, and we're there throughout the writing process to answer any of those queries. And hopefully everything stays on track and the author can then submit the manuscript to us. We will then carry out our own checks in-house on the manuscript. Depending on the nature of the manuscript, we might send it out for further peer review by a specialist. And if there are concerns, again, we would ask an author to potentially revise the manuscript on that basis. But generally speaking, if a project remains as it was proposed to us and is in line with the sign-off that the book got at contract stage, then we would just assess it in-house and then pass it on to our production team. The production team will then put the book through a rigorous production process, which includes copy editing it, typesetting it, creating an index. The authors are issued proofs. They check on the proofs and give their feedback. And then that goes through the process of creating a book manuscript, which will be produced electronically and also in a physical format. And while that production process is going on, the sales and marketing operation will obviously ramp up as well. And that sales and marketing process will mean that the book is being displayed globally to potential buyers in the for the majority of our books are aimed at an academic audience. That will mainly be scholars and academic librarians, people who are kind of interested in certain subject areas in which we're publishing. And then when we get to the end of the process, the book will come out as publication. The copies will go to the editors or authors, and we'll continue to talk to the author about how they can be involved in helping to promote and market their book. So I'll go into a little bit more depth about doing a proposal and the peer review process now. I don't know if there are any more questions, Elvin, at this stage.
Okay. There's one question coming out. Just give me a moment. I'll put it up.
No problem.
Okay. Is it necessary to write a full book at the proposal stage, or simply a brief synopsis of the book?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Thank you for that. No, it's certainly not necessary for the book to be written ahead of proposing the book or at the time that you propose the book. What we would normally expect is that someone will sort of have an idea for a book based on research that they've been doing, but we appreciate that they may not have completely completed that research, and that they also may not have got to the point where they're able to sit down and write it all yet. So no, we factor in, as the previous slide showed, we factor in time, a period of time for the author to work on the manuscript, which, as I say, is generally anything from sort of 12 months to 24 months, so a year, 2 years. Obviously, if people can deliver it to us sooner, we'd be very happy for that. But no, you don't need to have completely written the book before you submit it.
Okay, all right. There's one more question.
Oh, yeah,
here.
sure.
Yep, just one more. If the content of the book is excerpt of thesis, do we need to include the SV committee's names as well?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it certainly works. So at the start of most book publications, there will be an acknowledgements page, and this is obviously where people will often sort of give thanks to people that have helped them with working on the book,
Yeah.
or where they might feature, details of any permissions that they've got for featuring certain material in the book. And I think that would be a good place to acknowledge, other people who have been involved in commenting on the thesis. Yes, certainly.
Okay, thank you for your reply. Now, you can go ahead. There's no more questions at the moment.
Brilliant, thank you, Elvin. Okay, so yes, as I said, I'll move on to talk a little bit about the proposal and peer review in a bit more depth. So, yeah, the first step, as I said, prior to putting together a proposal, is to actually make contact with the publisher. Very often people will submit us full proposals before they've actually said, hello, I would like to write a book on this particular topic. And the difficulty there is people can put in a lot of work and time and effort into producing a proposal that actually isn't a fit with the publisher's wider publishing program. So as a commissioning editor and at Emerald, and it'll be the case at other publishers, all the contact details are available on their website. So if you go onto the Emerald website, you can see a picture of myself and my email address, and you can contact me directly if your book is in the areas which I covered, which I mentioned earlier on, and say, hello, I'm a researcher at this institution and I'm working on this and I'm interested in doing a book proposal. Would that be a fit for you? And I'll let you know, and try and let you know quickly whether it would or it wouldn't. And if it is, then I would send you our book proposal form and ask you to complete it. And it may be that depending on the stage that you're at with the project, you might already have some sample material available. And if you do, then that's great for us to have alongside the proposal when you submit it. So just breaking down what actually goes into a publishing proposal. There should be a description of the project. So we ask for a short description, which is to try and sort of sum up what the book will be about in sort of 40 to 50 words, which is really helpful for us when we're talking about it internally. And then we ask for a kind of longer breakdown, which would be about 300 words, that sort of talks about issues like the level of the book, who it's going to be aimed at, what it's going to cover, what problem in the kind of research field it's addressing. And what we also ask is for a predicted table of contents, and within that table of contents, a breakdown of each of the chapters. So a summary, basically, of what that chapter will cover. So you would normally start with an introductory chapter, so perhaps talking about the issue surrounding a certain field and why it is you're focusing on it, or the history of a particular subject area. So then you can get to talking about the present and the research that you've been doing. So we'd expect you to sort of detail a clear structure for the work, and then within that structure, what's going to be covered in all of the chapters. Also in the proposal form, there is a section on marketing and competition. the first point here is quite important about being realistic with regard to potential markets. So our form breaks down sort of 5 different levels, you know, whether the book is aimed at an undergraduate audience, whether it's aimed at other scholars, whether it's aimed at a professional audience. What it's important to do is not try and appeal to everybody with your project, because often that can mean it doesn't really appeal to anybody. It's much better to say, you know, I've done a lot of research on the theory of this particular subject, and I feel that I've got an important contribution to make to other scholars who are researching in this area. And if you feel that is where your book sits, that's what you should say. This book should be for this person, because from a marketing point of view, that gives us the best opportunity to reach the right people with the book. I mentioned in response to the earlier question about looking at the other books that are already out there from other publishers, and then, you know, assessing those books. If you can get access to them at your institution, reading them, or at least taking a look over them, and detailing how your book will differ, and, you know, hopefully be better, and hopefully reach, you know, make a contribution to the research field. And as it says here, saying that there's no competition for your book is often not likely to be the case, you know, unless it's a very, very, very niche field. And you know, so it's definitely worth taking a look. And even if that is as simple as going on to Google Books or going on to Amazon and putting in the subject area that you're looking to write on and just seeing what comes up, it might throw up a book that you're unaware of. And then you can take a look at that and say how your contribution would differ. And in the proposal form, we ask for people to suggest a title for the work. So people don't have to necessarily say this is the final title for the work. They could suggest a range, and then, you know, the editor will comment on that, or peer reviewers might comment on that. What we always encourage people to do is try and have a book title that is quite descriptive, and will be instantly kind of recognizable and identifiable for people working in that field. Part of the reason for this is digital discoverability. So we will tag our books with metadata tags. But, you know, one of the kind of most powerful tags that are out there for searching online is having a book that matches search terms. So if you're doing, for example, a book on sustainability and supply chain management, calling your book Sustainable Supply Chain Management will mean that it gets in front of people who search for that issue online. It will come up higher in the search terms. And if you give it a title which is possibly sounds a bit more poetic, like Green is the New Gold, which is a cool title, but it's highly unlikely anyone's going to type that into a search engine if they're looking to find out stuff about sustainable supply chain management, whether that's a search engine on the internet or a library search engine. So descriptive kind of titles work very, you know, generally will tend to work best. And so yeah, being clear and concise, differentiating from other titles that are out there where it's possible to do so. And yeah, the practicalities element is very important. We ask in the proposal for a manuscript delivery date. And we ask that people are honest about when they feel that can be. It may be that you know, you're under pressures to publish quickly, you know, from, say, maybe your institution, you wants to see you publish your research quickly. But if it is going to take you time to write the manuscript, you do need to factor that in. And it's much more difficult for a publisher if someone says, I can deliver the manuscript in 6 months, and then find that after 6 months, actually, they couldn't do that and they need a 6-month extension. So it would have been better from the start to say, I need a year to work on the manuscript. So I think it's definitely, you know, important to be realistic about that, to think carefully about your word count for the overall manuscript, so you're not underestimating or overestimating that. Yeah, absolutely be aware of issues around clearing permission for using third-party material. So if you're going to draw on previous research that's been published as journal articles and other with other publishers, do you have the right to reproduce, you know, large elements of that? It's worth checking on that. If you want to feature a number of tables and figures that are potentially well known, that really strengthen your argument, but they've been produced by other scholars and you really need to reference them. Can you get permission to use those? We do ask in the proposal for people to suggest potential reviewers that we can consider to peer review the work. We won't always go to those. We will sort of drop our own shortlist based on the research that we do, but we will consider them as part of that. But it's important that you don't just list people who you already have a good working relationship with, or maybe are your PhD supervisor, because it's difficult for them. It puts them in a difficult position sometimes to be able to give a wholly kind of impartial view. So the best thing to do, or to suggest to people who, if you're in dialogue a lot with someone in the research that you're doing, or you're drawing on someone's research, consider putting their name down. You may not have a working relationship with them, but if they've been important in the formulation of the work that you've done, the research that you've done, maybe it's worth having them comment on it. And this is just a quick overview of the peer review process. So, and if any of you are publishing in journals, I'm sure you're very well aware of this. It really doesn't differ too much from books. But yeah, you submit to us. It may be that the book doesn't fit and the editor could reject it at that stage. The editor in-house will select peer reviewers, ask them to evaluate the manuscript. We get their feedback. They either say, this is good, accept it. They might say, reject it. And then we'll let you know if we get that as a coherent, piece of feedback across all 2 or 3 reviews, then we would normally say, okay, we can't take this forward. And I mentioned about them saying about revising the work, that's something that we do, request that authors do, and they may have to resubmit the proposal to us, and we may decide to get that re-reviewed possibly by some of the same peer reviewers, or potentially by other peer reviewers. So before I talk about the post-peer review, I just want to check in on any other questions, if that's okay, Elvin.
At the moment, there's no questions.
Okay, that's great. That's fine. Thanks. I'll just press on. Brilliant.
Yeah.
So after the peer review process, the publisher would then take the project forward to our internal editorial board. They present the project to them. They would say that that we feel that this will make a good contribution to our overall program, and hopefully the board will be in agreement. Normally the board would be in agreement, and the book project will get approved, and then the publisher will come back to the author or the editor with an offer for a contract. As I've said earlier, some of the things that the contract offer will detail will be like a delivery date for the manuscript, as I say, usually about 12 to 18 months time to write the work, a royalty paid on the net receipts, so the sales of the book. And then we'll detail how long the manuscript should be, and we'll take that from the feedback that's been given in the original proposal. But we do costings for our work. So if someone says my manuscript needs to be 200,000 words, that's quite a long manuscript, and it's going to be difficult then for us as a publisher to make much of a profit of a book of that length because of the production costs involved. So we might, in that case, talk to an author about, well, does it really need to be that long? Could you could you do it in half the length? Or if it really does need to be that long, could this actually be 2 books, like an A and B volume publication? And we'll discuss how many images should be featured in the book. Once the contract is agreed and signed, then as it says, you have until your delivery date to work on the manuscript, and we'll be in touch with guidance, and are there to support. And if there are issues come up, because we do know academics, when they're writing a book, they're obviously having to, still work full time for their institution. They're doing other research. They're having to teach. They're having to mark. So we understand that sometimes book projects end up going on the back burner, and people can't commit as much time to them as they may want to. What we always ask, from my point of view as an editor, is just to keep in touch with us. Don't go quiet. If something happens in life or at work, which means you can't make the deadline you've agreed to, let us know as soon as possible. We're always happy to negotiate and discuss like a different deadline if that's needed. So yeah, please do get in touch. And then once you have completed the work and you feel it's final, then you submit the final manuscript to us, and we'll assess that. As I say, that depending on the type of work, there might be a further clearance read that's done by a specialist before the book goes into production, or it may just pass straight to production if we're happy with it. So this slide goes into quite a lot of detail about the production process. So the parts that we have kind of most engagement with are those pre-handover checks and the actual handover and the briefing of the cover design for the book, which the author will obviously get to comment on, because our designers in-house will create maybe 2 or 3 different potential options, and then the authors get to choose the one that they feel is the best fit for the book. But once the book goes into production, the manuscript will be typeset by a professional typesetter, and they'll be looking at copy editing issues. They'll be flagging up grammatical errors, inconsistencies, potential omissions, and the page proofs will go to the author, and the author will get to comment on the suggested kind of changes and checks that have been put in. If you're not a native English speaker, and maybe you haven't had experience of writing a book before, we might do a more detailed copy edit on the work, on the manuscript when it is submitted to us. That's a decision that we'll make at the handover stage. Once the proofs have been completed and collated, we will then pass those back to the author. They will get an opportunity to comment on them, and we will check them internally. That will be then result, once we get to the stage where everyone is happy, it will be prepared for a print order. The book will publish just in advance of the physical version as an electronic publication, and then the book will come out, and we'll publish it in print. And the files are archived at Emerald, but then also it will be sold all around the world, and it will be available for people who subscribe to our ebook collections, which is the case in numerous institutions around the world. Or it might be that a library wants to purchase a physical copy or copies, and our sales representatives in those regions will facilitate that. And then hopefully, from my perspective as a commissioning editor, the author or the editor will be happy with the final publication, and that they'll have had a really good experience with Emerald, and they will, I can then continue the conversation with them, keep in touch with them, and when they get to the stage of thinking about doing another book project, they'll get in touch with me, or we'll keep in contact, and they might consider taking it back to Emerald to work with us again. That's always what we're keen to see. We want to foster a community of academics globally in a range of areas who sort of feel they have a good relationship and connection with Emerald, and that we become one of, if not the first choice for them when they want to publish their work, whether it's a book or whether it's in one of our journals or teaching cases or open access research. So that really is the end of the presentation from my point of view. We've obviously taken questions as the presentation has gone on, but I'm happy to take more now, following on from the presentation from anyone who has a question. Just prior to doing that, though, I just wanted to highlight some useful resources that we have available. I think Elvin might be able to share this with the attendees following the presentation. So we can circulate this, but yeah, we have a books author hub on the Emerald Group Publishing website that goes into a lot more depth on all the issues I've been discussing, and you should be able to find the answer to most questions on there. But equally, I'm happy to address any questions now or follow-up questions via email. And then there are numerous other resources from third parties that might be of interest to the attendees on this call to take a look at independently when they have the time. Some of these have been collated by my colleagues who are doing more kind of social sciences areas. So if you're in business, they may not be a direct fit, but there's some really good general guidance available across these different resources. So yeah, thank you all very much. And yeah, Elvin, if there are any more questions at this stage, I'm happy to take them.
Okay. Regarding the resources that you just shared, all the attendees who are attending today, they are actually getting a recording of the session, so they were able to view back the session and look at the resources again. All right. Great. So okay, I do have a few questions that comes in. Okay, the first one is quite straightforward. What is the typical royalty rate?
Yeah, so the royalty rate varies. It's a negotiation between the commissioning editor and the author or editor. I think I've worked at a few different academic publishers in books publishing, and I would say that the royalty rates that are offered are fairly standard. I'd actually say in some cases Emerald could be a bit more generous than some other publishers. But generally speaking, I'll be very open. It's usually a single percentage royalty rate. So you're talking anything from sort of 1% up to 10% of net receipts, so the sales of the book publication in physical format, so whether that's hardback or paperback or in electronic format. It can be the case that a publisher might negotiate with an author what's called a riser. So that would be the case that if you sell over a certain threshold of copies, your royalty rate will increase incrementally, and then if you sell another threshold, your royalty rate will go up again. That's quite rare for academic books. It's more the case for professional titles where we sort of see that there will be that kind of broad audience, and we have a print run to shift. Something I didn't say actually in the presentation that I should have made clear is a lot of the production that we do on our books, we produce them what's called POD, which means print on demand. So the reason we do that is because, and this is industry standard now in academic publishing, the cost of printing a large number of copies of a book and holding them in a warehouse and shipping them globally, and holding them we might have to hold them in multiple warehouses across the globe, is very, very expensive for publishers. So with print on demand technology now, it means that if someone in Malaysia wants to buy a physical copy of one of our books, the files can be made available and they can be printed locally and then shipped directly to that particular buyer. And that turnaround time can be very, very quick now, or they can be printed here in the UK, and the shipping can be maybe slightly longer but still quite good. So print on demand technology means that we're not having to sort of hold a large amount of stock. So the days of us sort of doing initial print runs of like 500 copies or something like that, we do still do those for certain titles, but I wouldn't say that's the norm anymore. But yeah, so for a standard academic monograph, I think you're probably looking at anything in the region of sort of 5 to 7 or 8% maybe, as a standard kind of net receipt royalty rate.
Okay, thank you for the information. The next one will be our Emerald books indexed in Scopus, and how do we find out if a book chapter will be indexed in Scopus in the future?
Yes, so we have an agreement with Scopus and also with Web of Science to feature all of our book publications. So that's the book itself as a publication, and also all the chapters that feature in those. My understanding at the moment is that there's this there's quite a long tail of book titles, because we have obviously published numerous book titles prior to making this agreement, and we have new ones coming out every year, 300 plus every year. So there is a bit of a backlog for Scopus certainly to get through for the listing of all of our book titles, but we have an agreement with Scopus for all of our book titles to be listed on there, and that would be the case for everyone who contributes a chapter to a book as well.
Okay, the next one, and I think is still going to be the last one. I don't have questions. Do urban studies or urban planning field have the potential to be published in Emerald? I couldn't find it on the web.
Yeah, so we have published some urban studies books in the past. We I think used to have more of a list. I know we have journals in that area. It's not so much of an area of focus for us. It would very much depend on the book and the subject matter of the book. It's if there is, I mean, we do publish work around issues like smart cities, for example, and that one, if there's kind of interdisciplinary aspects that we can see it being a broad fit with some of our other areas, then it potentially would be considered. We don't have a designated built environment list like publishers like, for example, Routledge, I know have a built environment and planning and landscape publishers. We don't have that, so it would probably be on a kind of case-by-case basis that we would assess if something was a good fit for us.
Correct. So I believe the potential author, need to send in the proposal for us to have a look first.
Yeah,
Before
or
we
at
decide.
or alternatively, just send us a sort of a brief synopsis, maybe like details of the subject area and the issue that they're exploring, and then we can advise on that. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let me see. There are no more questions coming in.
Okay.
Anything else from you, Niall?
No, I don't think. I mean, I think we've
Need to
covered.
ask advice for them?
In terms of advice, yeah, I mean, I think the best thing I can advise really is to talk to commissioning editors. So it may not be that you necessarily have an idea for a project right now, but when you're attending conferences, I know at the moment it's obviously a bit more complicated with the pandemic globally, and we're not all meeting up and jetting around the globe like we normally would do to be in the same space as all our colleagues, in academia or in academic publishing. But when we do get to that stage, if you're at a conference, and usually at a conference, publishers will be there to display books and journals that they've published. And the people who attend those, I mean, it's not always the case, but normally, I attend 2 or 3 academic conferences a year. So I might go to URAM, which is the European Academy of Management, or AOM, the Academy of Management in the US. Do make the effort to go to those stands and talk to people, and even if the person you talk to isn't the commissioning editor for your area, they'll be able to advise and give a lot of kind of detail on what they're looking for their lists, and what issues you maybe need to consider if you're going to do a project in an area. And we like to talk to people, you know, like we love to talk about people's research, and I know academics love to talk about their research, you know, so you know, we're always really interested to hear about it, and it's a two-way conversation. It's not just people coming to us and us giving them information. We like to hear from you about the fields that you're working in, how they're developing, what the new, you know, hot topics are or key issues are, and you know, we use that guidance to formulate our own commissioning strategies. So it's important that that kind of conversation continues, you know, whether it's online at the moment, you know, whether it's, you know, discussing things over email or having a phone call, and certainly in person, obviously, when we're able to do more of that. But you know, I know we've got really, really well connected Emerald colleagues in the region, and you know, I think that they're going out and engaging with academics. You know, Elvin and William, these guys, they're out, you know, talking to academics all the time, and I just encourage you all, you know, when you know, to have those conversations and to keep them broad. You know, like to not just talk about, you know, what books can you buy or what collections can you subscribe to, but talk about, you know, where your research is at and the issues that you've got, or maybe what your institution is prioritizing in terms of research. All of that is really, really helpful for us to hear about.
Okay. All right. Thank you now for the advice.
No problem.
All right. I think we'll be wrapping the session. And I would like to thank Niall for attending today. Thank you for your effort and your time. And I would also like to say a big thank you to UCSI University as well, to the Postgrad Center for coming to us and requesting for a session that we are gladly sharing today. And do look for us, like Niall have said, Emerald, we are quite supportive of the academicians. And if you have any questions, just come to us, or you can refer to the UCSI University Library or the Postgrad Center to get more information. All right. So I guess that's all today. I don't see any questions coming in. All right. So we'll give you a wrap. Thanks now. Thanks everyone.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you very much indeed, everybody. Have a good day. Take
Bye-bye.
care. Thank you, Elvin. Bye-bye.
Bye now. Have a good weekend.
Yes, you too. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.